Good evening. It's really wonderful to see such a large crowd. Thank you. I'm honored to speak to you today. Whoops. I believe it's on, yeah. I'm honored to speak to you today on the eve of Antonín Dvořák's birthday, marking also the 125th anniversary of the great composer's arrival in America. You may wonder why I'm presenting a visit to Antonín Dvořák's country home at Vysoká in a program primarily dedicated to exploring Dvořák's New World experience. First of all, it's an opportunity to view the place where Dvořák spent his birthday and much of the summer of 1892, before undertaking the courageous experimental voyage to America to assume directorship of the National Conservatory of Music of America and to live as a resident of New York City from late September 1892 to April 1895, with a few interruptions. Secondly, I was fortunate to visit Dvořák's country house several years ago and to be given a personal tour by the composer's grandson, Antonín Dvořák III, sadly recently deceased, and it is in his memory that I recall this visit. Vysoká, located near the town of Shibran, close to 40 miles southwest of Prague, was the place that composer Antonín Dvořák held most dear and had the greatest difficulty leaving. It was the place where he began or finished composing over 30 of his works, including 2 that he prepared for presentation in America, the Colombian Te Deum, premiered at Carnegie Hall in his first American appearance, and the American Flag, which he actually finished in America and was aired much later. He also composed at Vysoká the Humoresques that you will hear later in this program, basing them on ideas drawn from his American sketchbook. At Vysoká, Dvořák happily gathered with family and friends, and at the same time found the solitude to compose many of his great works. On the edge of the tiny village of Vysoká, surrounded by a high stone wall, was the summer home of Dvořák and his family. Dvořák bought the property from Count Václav Konec, his brother-in-law, who owned a vast estate in the area. Until 1884, the Dvořáks spent their summers with the Konec family on the other side of the village. But because Dvořák desired his own place, the Count sold him a small plot and dwelling shortly after the composer's international successes in England. The building, originally a storehouse for grain adjacent to other farm buildings, was improved by Dvořák, but remained extremely modest in comparison to the stately aristocratic Konec summer residence located on the other side of the village, and you will see that a bit later in my talk. In the 1920s, some 2 decades after Dvořák's death, the Dvořák family made further improvements to the house. They added secessionist-style embellishments to the exterior, and the name Villa Rusalka was adopted due to its proximity to the small lake that inspired Dvořák to write his beloved opera, Rusalka. The late Antonín Dvořák III bore a remarkable resemblance to his grandfather. Born in 1926, the son of Otakar Dvořák, the second youngest of Dvořák's 6 children, he never knew his grandfather, but was dedicated to caring for the composer's legacy at Vysoká. Here, Antonín, or Tonda as he was called, points in the direction of Villa Rusalka. On the right, you see the humble farm building where Dvořák's caretaker lived, in the distance, Villa Rusalka. The L-shaped house faces the courtyard where Dvořák used to enjoy feeding his pet pigeons while seated on a bench. At the entrance is a traditional folk-style carved and painted panel door. The house is small. Dvořák rose from extreme poverty and never was a wealthy man. This is where the family and guests congregated, around the central table in this multi-purpose room for living, dining, and yes, sleeping. Photographs of the family line the walls, and Dvořák's bed is situated along a side wall. In a house barely large enough to accommodate a family with 6 children, this is where the composer and his wife actually slept. Above the bed are photographs of Spillville, Iowa, the Czech community where Dvořák spent his first summer in America. The house is not exactly as Dvořák left it in 1904, and some of the furnishings you see came from the composer's Prague apartment on Žitná Street. Displayed on one of the shelves are cabinet-carved photographs of several Native Americans Dvořák encountered in Spillville. Also seen on the right is a decorative frame with portraits of the three great living composers of the period: Brahms, who championed Dvořák early on, Tchaikovsky, who Dvořák visited in Russia, and of course Dvořák himself. The young lady with the hat, yes, you can see her well, is Dvořák's daughter, Magdalena. Close up here we see Dvořák's favorite image of Big Moon. Dvořák considered meeting Big Moon one of the highlights of his American visit. Also John Fox, and also the so-called Old Squaw. Dvořák's, directly above the ground floor, Dvořák composed in his private study. No one was permitted to enter unless invited. Books and albums cover the large table in the center of the room, and among them is a bound volume containing Dvořák's Slavonic Dances, the popular composition that catapulted him to international fame in 1878 and will be heard later in this evening program. Among the photographs and numerous honors is the framed certificate of honorary membership in the New York Philharmonic Society, awarded to Dvořák in April 1894 after the wildly successful premiere of the New World Symphony in December 1893. We are grateful to have this documentation thanks to Antonín Dvořák III. Also, at this end of the room stands Dvořák's upright small piano, bought secondhand in 1884. He could not afford a new piano. The portrait bust is by Ladislav Šarun, who originally sculpted it for Dvořák's tombstone at Vysoká. This cast was made for the Dvořák family in 1929. Šarun also sculpted the impressive monument to Jan Hus in the Old Town Square at Prague, which a number of you may have seen. Antonín Dvořák III opened the piano to show the inscription in Dvořák's hand, stating the name of the person he purchased the instrument from, Michko, and the amount paid, some 280 gulden, on May 1st, 1884. Too big for the staircase, the piano had to be hoisted through the window. As you can see here, with the framed certificates and colorful academic ribbons, Dvořák was a much decorated composer, though he did not enjoy the pomp and ceremony associated with these decorations. Here, in the center of this assemblage of photographs, you may recognize the portrait of Dvořák taken in the New York studio of William Spies in 1893. We have an imperial-sized copy of the same image in the Dvořák room, which you can inspect later. From the beautiful inset arched windows of this light and airy retreat, Dvořák had a view of the open fields where he liked to walk. From the other side of the house, he could enter the woods, offering a different kind of experience in nature, equally important to him for relaxation and finding inspiration for his composing activity. By the light of the window, Tonda here shows us the New York City report cards of his father, Otakar, which say simply, a good boy, and regular, punctual, and obedient. The report cards were apparently minimal in those days. Otakar later commented on the poor quality of schooling in America. Dvořák traces are everywhere at Vysoká, full of beautiful mature trees, the overgrown garden and surrounding wooded areas have a few specimen trees planted by the composer who enjoyed gardening very much. Up a flight of stone steps is a rustic gazebo made of birch. Under the shade of the roof, the family dined at midday. Dvořák entertained his friends, and he sometimes reviewed his students' compositions. The crumbling wood table still has traces of where Josef, Dvořák's student and later son-in-law, carved his name. And here you see it, just barely. Long gone is the formal garden around the gazebo, and below, a place where vegetables were grown and an alley for playing nine pins. Life at Vysoká was described as follows by Jan Hertan, the head gamekeeper, whose wife was Mrs. Dvořák's younger sister. During his summer stay at Vysoká, Dvořák used to go for a walk in the park and woods early every morning, and often he would wake us up at 5 o'clock and be surprised that we could still sleep while the thrushes were holding their morning concert above our heads. Often he went to the Kovařík and then came to me at the gamekeeper's lodge, and besides he was fond of walking in the fields, being often accompanied on his rambles by one of the local teachers. In the winter all was quiet at Vysoká, and work went on in the woods. But when spring passed into summer, when the Kovaříks arrived and the Dvořák family, things became lively at Vysoká. Nearly every day they all met at our place, at the Dvořák's, or in front of the Kovařík's villa. The Dvořák's were always having visitors, so that it was very gay and noisy, and then Dvořák usually disappeared into the woods for peace and quiet. He liked, too, to sit in the courtyard where he would watch for hours a flock of lovely pigeons, his pride and delight. Deep in the woods of the vast Kovařík's estate is the body of water named Vysoká's Lake, literally water nymph lake. More pond than lake and quite shallow. It nevertheless has mystical qualities that famously aroused Dvořák's imagination and creative powers. In summer, the water pleasantly bubbles and gurgles, and the dense foliage harbors birds that inspired Dvořák on so many occasions. The Neo-Renaissance style Kovařík residence, built in 1878, was the summer home of Count Václav Kovařík and his wife Josefina, the older sister of Antonín Dvořák's wife, Anna. Dvořák had given the young sisters music lessons, and it is generally acknowledged that his first love was Josefina, an actress. While she rebuffed his attentions, Josefina and her husband later welcomed the Dvořák family to their estate and eventually sold the composer the small plot and building that became a summer house and remains in private hands. The Kovařík residence is now the Antonín Dvořák Memorial and welcomes visitors year-round to the Exhibition and Music Center at Vysoká. Here I show you a gallery of period photographs from Vysoká. Family and friends gathered on the steps of the Kovařík villa in 1894 when Dvořák returned to Vysoká from America for the summer. Dvořák is seated on the lower left. Here are family members in front of the stucco Dvořák house. Dvořák is in the center. And several photos of Dvořák on the lawn at Vysoká with his children, generally at leisure. This was circa 1901-1902. And an elderly Dvořák feeding his pigeons. I hope this brief talk has broadened your appreciation of Dvořák's favorite corner of Bohemia, the better to appreciate the leap of faith he took in coming to America. Leaving his beloved Vysoká behind, Dvořák began his voyage from Prague on September 15, 1892, taking with him his wife Anna and 2 eldest children. I'm not sure which was more difficult, leaving behind the other 4 children or his summer home at Vysoká. But thankfully, Dvořák's spirit of adventure drew him to the New World and allowed him to find new inspiration for new compositions, as well as to contribute greatly to America's musical self-discovery. I cherish the memory of Antonín Dvořák III and his hospitality, and I'm grateful to have had this opportunity to share the experience with you. Thank you.